Good afternoon, everyone. Today I'm doing a special Speaking Moistly, and with me I have I don't know what your title is, sir, John Carpay, the leader of the JCCF. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on your show.
Thanks for coming. It's wonderful. What is your title at the JCCF? Just so we're on the same page.
President of the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. I always say Justice Center for short.
Fair enough.
And so we are a national organization, nonprofit, registered charity, and we have a team of 10 full-time staff lawyers across Canada who are defending the charter freedoms of expression, association, conscience, religion, peaceful assembly, bodily autonomy, travel, mobility. So basically, we sue governments, and that's what we do.
It's very difficult. It's very difficult to sue governments or to hold them accountable at all. As a private citizen, I am coming up against roadblock after roadblock, and they just don't respond to you. If you show, I have some issues with school boards, I have some issues locally that maybe we'll chat about. But if you show that you oppose what's going on, they almost block your email. They don't ever respond to you. Doug Ford doesn't respond to me. The Minister of Education in Ontario, I've been trying to get a meeting with them since 2019, 2020. Well, for years, since Doug Ford has been around, and it has failed every single time. And the way it fails is they just ignore me. And it seems like it doesn't matter what justification, or it doesn't matter how good your argument is. They can just shut it down with not responding. Is that been your experience? I guess you're a lawyer, so do lawyers get better response rates?
Well, it depends on the context, right? If I'm Joe Citizen who happens to be a lawyer, I don't necessarily get a response. I may or may not. If it's in the context of a court action, I mean, this is quite often, we've had lots of successes outside of the courtroom, where the lawyer sends a demand letter to a university, that tried to expel a student over having attended a peaceful outdoors anti-lockdown rally. And the student gets kicked out of university, and the lawyer writes a letter to the university and says, look, that what you did is illegal, and it's wrong, and if you don't reinstate the student, we're going to sue you. And then the university
suddenly
changed course. And we saw it recently too with Catherine Cronus in Ancaster, Ontario,
yes,
who politely objected to a land acknowledgement, and the school board kicked her off of the parent council to which she had been elected. Lawyers wrote a strong legal warning letter to the school board and said, what you've done is illegal, violation of free speech, violation of democracy, violation of due process. If you don't reverse your decision, we will sue you. And so just last week, the school board reversed its position and reinstated Catherine Cronus.
Well, that's great.
So sometimes the lawyer card does help.
Yeah, well, for sure. And I'm glad to hear about that. I had reported on that situation, and I hadn't seen that update. So that's wonderful. I'm glad to hear that Catherine's back to representing the parents that elected her. That's wonderful. So not changing gears a little bit, but today is kind of an auspicious day. Tamara Lich and Chris Barber, this is day 2 of their sentencing hearing. And did you watch any of yesterday's sentencing hearing? Did you see any of that?
I've been in touch with Chris Barber's lawyer, Diane Magus, and the Justice Center, thanks to the generosity of donors, we're paying for Chris Barber's legal bills.
Wonderful.
So I did know that she was arguing that there should be no jail time for Chris Barber.
Yeah.
But beyond that, unfortunately, I've not been able to follow the proceedings on a hour by hour,
fair
minute
enough
by minute basis.
Yeah, no, well, a lot of people were expecting a verdict yesterday, and so I started my show yesterday, and people were asking where the verdict is, and I said, holy smoke, guys, that hasn't even happened yet, right? And then I was surprised yesterday there was no sentencing yesterday. It's a 2-day thing. It just seems to be taking a long time. This longest mischief trial in history. There was some comparisons drawn for the G20 in Toronto, that mischief trial, or those mischief trials where people who had ill will created millions of dollars in damage. They had black coverings on their faces, and these people didn't get any kind of jail time. And so it seems like Chris Barber and Tamara Lich are being politically targeted, or it seems like there's something hinky about this whole thing. Is this normal? Is it me being naive as a citizen? Should citizens bow down to the government when they say, all of the crazy things that they say and just not question them at all? Is that like, am I being crazy, or is this strange? Is the situation strange from your point of view? And I mean, like from a citizen's point of view, you don't have to give me a constitutional lawyer point of view if you don't want to.
Well, we've got a big problem in Canada with the double standard on law enforcement that depends on the politics of the protester, where the only thing the police and the Crown prosecutor should be looking at is the behavior of the protester, not whether they are, pro-Israel, anti-Israel, pro-lockdowns, anti-lockdowns, whatever. The issue that you're protesting for or against should be completely irrelevant. It should be just only your behavior. Yeah. So you see this very frightening double standard. The most glaring example I can think of was in July of 2021 in Manitoba. There's some Aboriginal protesters against residential schools. They tore down and vandalized a large statue of Queen Victoria, which is a crime because the only property you can destroy is your own property. You can't destroy, if you destroy somebody else's property or public property, that is a crime. So you have a crime committed in broad daylight, and the policemen are just standing there watching. And a few months later, the Crown prosecutors in Manitoba issue a public announcement. They're not laying charges. They're not prosecuting any of these criminals over their crime. And it's obviously because, well, you know, we really feel that, you know, they're protesting for the right cause. It's like, no, it doesn't matter what the cause is. You can't vandalize public property. Yeah. And I can't help but wonder if Tamara Lich and Chris Barber, instead of having these rather rude anti-Trudeau flags, if they'd been waving rainbow flags and Hamas flags, would the Crown be prosecuting them this aggressively and spending so much of the Crown's limited resources on mischief convictions, as opposed to focusing on murderers and rapists and people charged with aggravated assault?
Yeah, no, it's certainly interesting. And I mean, the pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel, whatever kind of protesters and others as well, not just them, but those as a main kind of group, those people have been engaging in violent protests, intimidation tactics, shutting down streets, all sorts of very, very violent things, and really impactful for communities. And they don't drumming, right? On constant drumming. I've seen people come out of their offices saying like, this is disrupting us. We can't think because of this. Can you stop? And they get made fun of. Whereas in Ottawa, honking was interrupting my Netflix. That's a problem. And so we don't have to wonder, you know what I mean? Like, we can watch the two-tiered system in action right now, and they do the same thing. And it's, I posit the theory that the people who were doing the railway blockades in 2018-19 are the same as the people who were pulling down statues in 2021 and 22. It seems to be, and I don't know if this is accurate, but it seems to me, my gut feeling is somebody's paying for this, and somebody's telling these people, police, to look the other way. And I don't know who it is, and I don't know what kind of system could do that, but it really feels like something's gone completely wrong, and I don't know how to fix it. I feel like, oh man, fixing it is beyond the pale. Like, I don't know how to do that at this point in time, which is terrible. Again, with Chris Barber and Tamara Lich's stuff, Eva Chipik, who's another lawyer in the fray, if you will, she's supporting an RN who was vaccine injured, and she was debanked yesterday by the Royal Bank, and Tamara Lich herself was debanked by PayPal yesterday as well. So we're going to get to a Justice Center case in just a minute about debanking, but what do you think about that? Can a corporation that is federally regulated and has, I mean, it's not like I could become a bank. It's not like I could be like, put it in Mark's bank, I've got your back. I'd have to go through federal regulations. There was a whole bunch of stuff. So you can't just open up your own bank. It's not going to be like, opening your own bank and don't worry about what the Royal Bank does. There's 5 major banks, and one of them, or 2 of them, Scotiabank, I think is another one, are shutting down people's accounts because of vague risk assessments that there's no trial, there's no hearing, there's no pushback, there's no nothing. Can you offer any insight into like what they're doing and what people can do to respond to that if they find themselves on the receiving end of that letter?
Well, on a practical level, I mean, you can take your business away from the Royal Bank, BMO, TD, Bank of Nova Scotia, et cetera, and go open an account with a credit union,
Mm-hmm.
which for most people and even most businesses is an excellent, viable option. In Alberta, there's one in particular, Bow Valley Credit Union is popular
Yeah.
amongst people who are not woke progressives because the bank is, this credit union, its president said publicly that if he received an edict from the federal government to freeze somebody's bank account, he would provide some pushback and say, well, wait a minute, is this legal? Is this constitutional?
Mm-hmm.
All of these banks have got huge legal departments, and they've got the capacity, if they want to push back on things. And when the federal government told them to freeze accounts without any due process,
Mm-hmm.
people whose accounts were frozen had no opportunity to defend themselves. And this is just based on the prime minister disliking
Yeah.
the cause that they're donating to. I mean, it's so banana republic, third world repressive dictatorship.
Yeah. Well, and
None
the other aspect of it, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just want to interject as well. The list of people who donated was retrieved by a hacker who admitted that he hacked the database. So you can't use, how could this even be, you know what I mean? Like, it blows my mind when there's no due process, there was no charge, there was no trial, there was no conviction. There was Chrystia Freeland smiling like the Wicked Witch of the West, saying, you know, I'll get you, my pretties, essentially, right? Like, it's unbelievable. And yet we're supposed to sing, we're supposed to treat this government with respect and call them honorable. It's a bit far for me. Like, holy smoke, right?
The common element in what we've talked about so far with the double standard in prosecutions and now this debanking, it's this woke equity, diversity, inclusion,
Mm-hmm.
neo-Marxist ideology that sees society as being in a perpetual, never-ending war of oppressors versus oppressed.
Mm-hmm.
And as neo-Marxist in the sense that the old Marxism said that society is a perpetual war between the evil, exploiting capitalist bourgeoisie and the good, oppressed workers, the proletariat. And so there's this ongoing permanent conflict between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, or between the capitalists and the workers. And so it doesn't matter in Marxist ideology. It doesn't matter if you or I or anybody watching or listening, for us to cultivate goodness in our own character, right? To strive to become somebody who is more generous, more kind, more honest, more courageous, and the individual choices we make on how we live our lives and how we treat people, all of that doesn't matter. What really matters is this class warfare. Now, people got tired of the old Marxism, and it didn't catch on. A lot of people are just like, no, it's an oversimplification. If your mom's a nurse and your dad's a small businessman, I mean, neither of them, who's the capitalist oppressor? I mean, it's totally unclear.
Yep.
But what the new Marxism now is the same oppression narrative, but now instead of capitalist versus worker, it is male versus female,
Mm-hmm.
straight versus gay, dark-skinned versus light-skinned, et cetera, et cetera. And it's the same ideology that negates the infinite value of every human being, and instead says it doesn't matter what you do individually. You're not going to make the world a better place by trying to become a better person. Forget about that. Mm-hmm. It's all about this permanent warfare between men and women, white versus black, etc. That's the problem, and it's that ideology that has infiltrated the school boards, the universities.
Mm-hmm. Do you know the term "the end of history"?
Yeah, Fukuyama, the book from 1991.
Yeah, but that's essentially, Chrystia Freeland references it a lot, and that's essentially what they're going for. The end of history is the end of power struggle, right? But the power struggle is constant. The end of history is like this bringing forth of the utopia, right? History doesn't exist anymore because we all exist in the utopia, and that's what they're trying for. But Marxism, communism, it doesn't work. It just creates problems that they then blame on their opponents, right? Like, and that becomes the engine, this constant blame. But they're striving for this utopia, and they call it the end of history. I was just wondering if you'd heard the term before. But yeah, they're open about it, and people don't understand not what they're agreeing with, but that conflict that that you were talking about, it negates the minutia. It negates the details. Like your mom's a nurse and your dad's a business owner and nobody's whatever. It negates that and it strips it down to it's a power play. My power negates the bad guy's power, whoever the bad guy is. And so I have to have power. And if you are a part of the bad guy's faction, I have to take away your power. So the second you say that man can't be a woman, now you've identified yourself as an enemy. And now it's a strict power struggle, period. And they take you down by ignoring you. They take you down by debanking you. They take you down by creating legal problems for people. I mean, Tamara Lich didn't ruin a statue. Tamara Lich didn't do anything physically to anything in Ottawa, and yet she's being scapegoated for the whole convoy. Same with Chris Barber. And that's the power struggle, and people, that's the whole encapsulation of it. It's a power struggle, and unfortunately, the sane side is losing. I think I'm sane, but who knows, right? So,
well, people can push back by exercising their freedom of expression and by creating our own subcultures, right? That are beneath the radar. When parents are homeschooling their kids, as one example, yeah. You just say, we're not. School boards have gone so woke, and they're telling 5-year-old Johnny that he might be a girl and he could become a woman if he wants to, and all of this garbage, this very toxic ideology that's harming children. But people need to speak up against it, peacefully. Obviously, we shouldn't use violence, but people need to practice courage. And it's hard, because if you speak out against this woke neo-Marxist equity, diversity, inclusion, if you speak out against that ideology, you will be called racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic, white supremacist, Neanderthal, anti-science. I mean, the whole
everything.
The name calling starts. But I always feel slightly encouraged when I see the name calling or when it's directed against me, because I think, okay, so you don't have an intelligent argument.
Yeah. I won
to refute what I'm saying. So I won. Like now you're calling me anti-science rather than debating science.
Yep.
It says it all.
It does. That actually is perfect, because so I lost my YouTube channel in 2021 for saying things that the people didn't like. And I stood up and I said, I don't care. You're not going to silence me with your sticks or your carrots. You can take my YouTube channel. You can take my money. You can demonetize me. You can do everything you want to me. I don't care. I don't work for you. I work for the people who watch my show and who support me. And so my show left YouTube, and I just got my YouTube channel back just this year, like just recently. Right. And so that's pretty crazy. But if you stand up against this ideology, like I was going to ask you, is it crazy for me to feel like me doing my show every day, which is just straight news headlines? Like I just talk about the news headlines, and I have I call it suspicious eyebrows. I'm like, you think that's really happening, or do you think maybe there's more to this, right? And in 2021, I was a little bit more on the nose. I called Justin Trudeau potato-headed Justin Trudeau, and he didn't like that. I know for a fact that he did not like the nicknames that I had for him, and I made fun of him a lot. And so he targeted my show. Like people would anonymously message me and say, there are very, very important people who are watching your show and angry at the language you're using. I was like, what are you talking about? And they were like, explained a little more. And I was like, wow, that's funny. So I did it more. And so I lost my show. And if you are a person who stands up, our society is not supposed to, and I mean, a friend of mine argued that our society is definitely that way. If you stand up against, if you go back to, medieval times when the church was much more powerful, if you said, the church is incorrect and I'm right, then they would, knock you with heresy, and they'd do all sorts of stuff, and people would make fun of you, and they'd kick you out of the church, and, people made their own church and all sorts of other stuff. So my friend argues that this has always been the way. And I argue that I thought that we were striving for something more. I thought we had a justice system where justice was blind, and that justice was supposed to be administered under the rule of law structure, which is that if you're an adult of the majority age, regardless of your power, if you're the prime minister, if you're just some homeless schmo, you will be justice will be administered in a fair, blind way. And that's not true. And I thought that we had that. I thought that maybe I was naive in the 90s. Maybe I was naive in the early 2000s. I thought we had that. Do you think we have that? Is it been lost, or did we ever have that? Is it just the facade? And I mean, I know maybe that's a loaded question. I'm not meaning to get you, but like, is our justice system something that I can rely on? It doesn't seem like that at this point in time.
Well, it's always been imperfect, and you've from time to time you have a wrong outcome. Guilty person is acquitted, or innocent person is found guilty. You've got, but I think there's been a real decline because of this. Neo-Marxist woke ideology has infiltrated the legal profession. For example, every law society in Canada, or at least most of them, they have requirements where lawyers have to pay lip service to woke ideology and pretend to agree with it.
Right. How do you fight that?
Political indoctrination. Well, the Justice Center is suing the Law Society of Alberta over a mandatory political indoctrination on Aboriginal related issues. There's a course that every lawyer has to spend 5 to 10 hours doing this course, and kind of telling the Law Society that you agree with, decolonization as a good thing, even though it's never really defined. And you kind of have to, tell them what they want to hear. And this is across the country. I mean, in Ontario in 2018, the Law Society lawyers had to tick off a box saying that they agreed to promote equity, diversity, and inclusion in their lives. It was almost like a religious statement of faith. And that was they elected some really good benchers who were freedom-minded, and so that's no longer there. But there's other things. So the woke ideology, to the extent that it's infiltrated the law society, certainly the law schools, heavily infiltrated with this, the legal profession, and then judges are lawyers who have been through these law schools, who have been members of the law societies. So there's still a lot of good judges left, and I would say if it's just a breach of contract case, somebody cheated you out of some money in a business deal, you're likely to get a good verdict. But if you're like Matt and Nicole Alexander in Ontario, getting fired from their jobs as teachers, you don't have that same level of certainty when you get into the court system.
Yeah, well, and I was just going to say, so I have a situation, and I've contacted lawyers about it. It has to do with the Board of Education in my area, and they've put up posters now in the schools, in the high school, encouraging boys to use the girls' washroom, and they've said girls can go to a standalone washroom that smells like urine. Like, I went in to use the standalone washroom because I prefer standalone washrooms, and I walked in there and it stank, and all of them stank like pee. And I thought, this is not tolerable. And so I took a picture of it, and I've tried, and the education minister in Ontario won't respond to me. Doug Ford responded to me, and he said, I've sent this to the education minister to deal with, but I haven't heard anything back about that, unless this was a couple of months ago. And so I'm in a situation.
Have you talked to your local school board trustees?
My local school board. So the EFTO, or ETFO, the Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario, ETFO, is the most prolific group of people able to get their block of electorates elected. So they back school board candidates, and all the candidates are on board with this gender ideology. All of the trustees in my area are on board, and in fact, I think most of them have blocked me because they know my position. I ran for school board in the last election as well, and so
good for you.
I tried, man, but the ETFO is prolific. They get 80%. And so the lawyers, when I call the lawyers, they say the school board, the government is going to defer to the school board. The legal system is going to defer to the school board. And I was like, okay, that's probably right. I said, but this is insane. Like, this doesn't make any, this is clearly wrong. And the lawyers were non-committal. And I was like, well, so I feel like how much can I really, how can I get something done in this system? Because it doesn't feel like I can really personally, but I mean,
it takes time, effort, and energy to build up. See, school board elections are so neglected. Depending on the province, turnouts, 10%, 20%, 15%, 25%. It's so low, and yet all across Canada, you have school board trustees who do not represent what parents want for their kids. Right? You got these ideologues that are forcing the rainbow flag on everybody, and basically requiring people to say that they agree with what the rainbow flag stands for,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
But it's not impossible for citizens to build up. It takes a lot of effort. It would take a lot of time. But citizens can start up their own grassroots citizens groups where you compile lists of parents who want to protect their children from the harms of transgender ideology. And you get names and emails and phone numbers. You build up your list. It is possible to defeat the ETFO or whatever other unions. It just takes a lot of work. It also might take 2 or 3 election cycles to build up the capacity, so you get better at campaigning, and you have to build up a political machine. It takes a lot of time.
But it's difficult to, I ran for the PPC in 2019 as well. So it's not like I haven't been trying, because it's, 6 years on from that, and I have had 0 success, which is very, very unfortunate. I mean, my show's pretty successful, so that's good. But other than that, it's not political success. But I think political success is very difficult in the climate we've just described, like the 2-tiered justice system, people silencing you, removing YouTube channels and YouTube channels and banking at, vague, might cause risk or whatever excuses. So I don't know. I hear what you're saying. I'm not trying to be black-pilled, but it's one of those things where I look at things, I'm like, man, I've tried, and I'm a genuine doer. Like, I do things, I put things out, I get things done. I've got a whole list of things that I get done. Man, I don't feel like I could get much done. It feels like if Donald Trump, and I mean, Donald Trump, love him, dislike him, whatever, he's got a lot done. If he can't get done what he said he was going to get done in 2016, which is drain the swamp, I don't know what hope I have of draining the Canadian swamp, because I don't have billions of dollars.
No, but single-handedly, like you alone cannot, change the world. But the fact is, when you take action and step forward and speak and exercise, use your mind and your vocal cords, you mobilize and motivate other people to become more active. I'm a big fan of an old saying you've probably heard before: the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. Indeed. And it's attributed to Edmund Burke. But I think school boards are an example, right? Good people doing nothing. So we've had decades of people saying, well, school board election, whatever, I'm not interested, it doesn't concern me, not involved, not voting, not participating. Okay, so you got good people doing nothing, and the end result is you get people with very harmful ideologies that are harming our children. Yeah. Why? Because good people have done nothing. So I think it spreads. If you are active, as you are politically, it does encourage, motivate, mobilize other people to do likewise. Mm-hmm. So it's just that sustained effort over time does make a difference. We saw an example of this in Alberta. We had a premier who, promised to not lock us down. He had these moments of being anti-lockdown, and he would recognize the fact that the lockdowns did a lot more harm than good. And then he would flip-flop and lock everybody down again, and it was just back and forth. People were fed up. So a whole bunch of people took out a membership in his political party, mm-hmm. and there was a leadership review, and he got only 52%, 51% of the vote. Yep. He resigned as leader, yep. and we got a different premier. That was just by grassroots citizens getting active in the democratic process. We saw that basically removing one premier and putting a different premier into office because of grassroots activism by citizens. Yeah.
Now this is totally, we didn't talk about this beforehand or anything like that, but as we're talking about Alberta and as we're talking about grassroots, et cetera, what is your opinion or thoughts on Alberta separation, separatism, et cetera, not 51st state, but a separate independent Alberta that trades openly with the United States? And I've heard people want to build pipelines through the United States up to Alaska. Everybody's like, we can get to Tidewater anyway. What do you think about that?
I think the separatist movement would be a lot weaker than what it is if the federal government actually complied with the Constitution of 1867, which, for example, says that healthcare is exclusively provincial jurisdiction. Mm-hmm. Well, what do we get? We get the Canada Health Act, which, technically provinces don't have to comply with it, except that if they don't comply with the Canada Health Act, they're not going to get the federal funding. Mm-hmm.
That's how they bought access. They put that funding in there, and they said, "This is now we're in charge." That's why. Yeah.
So we've got one of the worst on a value for money basis. I mean, in Canada, we spend more per person on healthcare than just about any other country in the world.
Yep.
If we're not first, we're second or third. And on outcomes, doctors per capita, nurses per capita, number of hospital beds per capita, number of intensive care beds per capita, waiting times for cancer diagnosis, for cancer treatment. On every practical measure, we are 7th or 17th or 12th or 23rd.
Yep.
Right? So we got horrible performance. And this is what the Canada Health Act does. And provinces are not free to innovate and experiment with better healthcare policies as intended by the Constitution of 1867. Yep. So this is a problem where the Constitution is not being respected. I think that contributes to a much stronger separatist movement than what you would see otherwise. And also the disrespect for charter rights and freedoms when you've got fascist garbage like the Online Harms Act, which they're talking about reintroducing.
I'm not surprised.
So the separatist movement in Alberta would be far less strong if we had federal government that respected the charter and respected the Constitution. In terms of the legality, it is perfectly legal for Quebec or Alberta or any other province can separate from Canada. It's not contrary to Canada's Constitution, provided that you have a clear majority on a clear question. So it can't be some muddled, do you support, some greater autonomy, sovereignty, quasi-independence? Like, you've got to have a clear question.
Yeah.
But if there's a majority yes vote, a province can leave.
I feel so. I've read through the process of leaving, right? And I looked at it because Danielle Smith has been talking about it. There's been lots of people. Jeffrey Rath has been talking about it a lot too. So I looked up, practically, because I like to think practically. I like to think like, how does this flow into this, flow into this, flow into this? And so I looked at it. And the first thing they have to do is have a clear majority vote on a clear question. And who decides if the question is clear enough is not really clear. And what a clear question is not really clear. So there's all sorts of ways that somebody somewhere could be like, oh, well, we see that you got 65% here, but blah, blah, blah. And then it goes into a negotiation. And then it goes into a third step before it's actually done. And I thought to myself, when I looked at all of these steps, I thought to myself, there's an escape hatch here and here and here and here. And I think it's a situation where when you have media lying to you, which our media engages in lying all the time, and it's unbelievable what happens, and the stuff that passes as truth. So when you have media lying to you, it's very difficult to get a consensus because people are fueling their information with all sorts of things that may or may not be true, or may be true in one context but are not true in another context, and so on and so forth. And so this accusation of misinformation, the government is engaging in it more than anybody else. You know what I mean? Like, it's one of those things. And I think that they'll stymie an attempt by Alberta or any province indeed to be independent or to leave Confederation of Canada, et cetera.
Well, they'll do the best they can, but there's fewer and fewer Canadians are listening to the CBC, even though we're paying $1.4 billion per year for it.
Yep.
And more people are tuning into the Rebel and Juno News and the Epoch Times and the Western Standard, and
Canada Poly.
There's so many, absolutely, so many independent media, and people are not listening to the government-funded media nearly as much as 40, 50 years ago, when you and I don't know what your age is, but when you and I were in high school, they had a total monopoly. Like if it was the 6 o'clock news, and if you didn't make it onto the 6 o'clock news, nobody was going to hear about your issue, your problem, your cause. Nobody was going to hear anything. Now it's very different. If the for example, the Justice Center got boycotted by the government-funded media. I got next to 0 interviews in 2020, 21, 22. In all those years of lockdowns of vaccine passports, none of these supposed journalists who are supposed to be open-minded and present, all sides and interview different perspectives. None of them would interview anybody who was against the lockdowns or against vaccine passports. So we had a total boycott. I mean, the Justice Center got 0 mentions, even though we were at the forefront. We were the only civil liberties group in Canada that called for an end to lockdowns in May of 2020. I mean, zero coverage. But the word got out through the independent media, through the Rebel and True North and Epoch Times, Western Standard, and independent podcasters like yourself. And we reached a lot of people. The organization tripled in size.
Wow.
In 2021, 22, in those years, over what we had been pre-lockdowns.
Yeah, even despite the media like blackout. That's wild.
Despite the total media boycott, we tripled in size.
Yeah, well, that's good news. That's certainly good. I think it makes them frightened when they don't have control of the narrative. I think that the government gets concerned when they're not the ones calling the shot.
That's where you got the movement to try to control the internet and try to stop misinformation, which they're guilty of spreading themselves.
Worse than anybody who's just trying to keep up with what's true and what's not. You know what I mean? Like, holy smokeroonies. So why don't we talk about Mr. Blackman and what's happened with him? What happened with him was he was acquitted. They said, everything's cool. Everything's fine. And then not so much. What happened with him? They debanked him and then they froze his bank account. You explain what happened.
So he went to Ottawa after Mr. Trudeau illegally declared national emergency, contrary to the express provisions of the Emergencies Act, which, as a side tangent, the Justice Centre was involved as one of the parties getting that court ruling that the Emergencies Act was not complied with, and the government did violate our constitutional rights and freedoms with this invocation of national emergency and freezing bank accounts and so on. So Evan Blackman went to Ottawa after February 14th, after the declaration of a national emergency, and charged with, like Tamara Leach, Chris Barber, charged with mischief and charged with obstructing police. The Crown's evidence was limited to a drone aerial surveillance, no audio, and it actually showed Evan Blackman kneeling before the police, put his hand on his chest, was singing "O Canada," took his hat off, and the trial judge ruled, I think quite appropriately, that the Crown did not put forward sufficient evidence, right? The onus is on the Crown to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. And the judge said, sorry guys, you haven't met that burden of showing that he was engaged in mischief or obstruction. Unfortunately, that was appealed by the Crown, and a new trial was ordered. And so the Justice Centre is providing the lawyers for this. What our lawyers are now arguing is that if Evan Blackman is convicted in the new trial, we're going to call for a stay of proceedings, meaning basically no punishment. It's just going to stop because it was an egregious violation of his charter rights for the federal government to freeze his bank account.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the most recent development there is that the judge has ordered the TD Bank and the RCMP to turn over documents pertaining to the freezing of the bank accounts. They're not going into court for the whole world to see, but they're going to the judge. The judge is going to review those documents and make a subsequent ruling as to whether they are relevant to our potential application for a stay of proceedings.
So why wouldn't they be public? Why is the government allowed to hide their reasoning and any communications with the bank or anything like that? It was illegal in the first place, right? It was found to be an illegal invocation of the Emergencies Act. Why would the government have any kind of justification to keep that quiet?
Well, in the legal proceedings, there are circumstances where if the judge is not entirely convinced whether the documents are relevant, if the judge is not thoroughly convinced that they are relevant documents, or if the judge is concerned about some security or privacy concerns, a judge can say, those documents are going to me, I'm going to review them, and I'm going to issue a ruling as to which ones, if any, are going to be released. Okay. So if they are relevant, they will get released at a later date, but the initial stage is that the judge is going to look at it himself. Interesting.
Well, that's good news. How can, practically, we're years away from this now. It happened, 2022. in my mind, what happened was they invoked the Emergencies Act. They froze bank accounts. It was found to be erroneous. They weren't allowed to do that. It was illegal to invoke the Emergencies Act. And so there was never any consequences for invoking the Emergencies Act. There was never any consequences for freezing people's bank accounts without due process or charge or conviction. And so how do we square that? How do we deal with, like, the government saying this guy is a bad guy because he was in Ottawa after we said not to be in Ottawa? And yet they're behaving in a bad faith by stealing money from citizens without justification. And so why am I as a citizen supposed to listen to these people who claim that they're acting in my best interest, but are clearly not? Like, how, as a citizen looking at this invalidates government. It invalidates the courts. It invalidates everything, all of the institutions that I'm supposed to, as a citizen, rely on to protect me from overreach from all sorts of different places. And yet, if I say, well, that man can't be a woman, and also I'm unvaccinated, well, I'm sorry, buddy, you're out on your ear, right? Like, we don't care if you get hit by a car. We don't care what happens to you. You can die, and we don't care. In fact, we'd prefer it. That's what it feels like to me. So, like, why should I give these people any respect whatsoever? The courts, the institutions. Sorry.
We're seeing the rotten fruit and the bitter harvest of decades of apathy. 50 years ago, we understood and we believed that our parliamentary democracy, with government respecting the rights and freedoms of citizens, our enjoyment of the freedoms of speech and religion and conscience, legal protections for criminally accused persons, that you have a right to be silent, right? So that nobody tortures confession out of you or extracts confession out of you through torture. The right to a fair trial, the burden on the Crown to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the person is guilty, not an onus on the innocent person. All of these rights and freedoms in our parliamentary democracy, we actually believed that was superior to fascist Italy, National Socialist Germany, Imperial Japan, and you know, we believed that our political system, our basic rights and freedoms, our democracy, even though it's imperfect, it's not a utopia, it's not paradise on earth, but that we've got a system that's superior to the communist tyranny of the Soviet Union, where people did not have the freedoms of expression, conscience, religion, the right of parents to raise their own kids, outside of communist ideology, et cetera, et cetera. So we believed that our society was better, and we cherished these freedoms. What's happened is we've had 5 decades of generally a lot of prosperity for most Canadians anyway, and we've become kind of lackadaisical, and we haven't seen the stark contrast of a Nazi Germany or Soviet Russia, communist Russia. Well, we see some of it. We have communist China, okay, so we can see tyranny in another country up to a point, but it's not the same. And so now we've had this woke neo-Marxist ideology has infiltrated our education system at the kindergarten, elementary school, high school, university levels. The woke neo-Marxist ideology has infiltrated our medical and legal professions, so on and so forth. So we're now kind of reaping the harvest of decades of apathy. So we need to change culture and take back what belongs to us and assume our responsibility as citizens.
Yeah, it's interesting. In China, they've got the 15-minute cities. They've got that kind of rolled out during the vaccine passport days. I remember seeing lots of video of people in China checking in and checking out with their phones into neighborhoods and things like that. And this was trying to be normalized, right? And so you talk about how, we have this example of communist China, but communist China doesn't behave the way, it's almost neo-communist China, because like the original communist China was more brutal, I guess. But I don't have examples. But the current Chinese model is a quasi capitalism up until a certain point, right? Like if you have a small business and you make $1 million or $900,000 a year or something like that, China's not going to bother you. You can be rich. As long as you check in and out of your area, as long as you follow the quote unquote rules, they have social credit rules.
You can't criticize the regime. There was a case some years ago. There's some multimillionaire or billionaire publicly criticized the regime and
Jack Ma. Is it Jack Ma?
Probably.
Yeah, I think it's Jack Ma that you're talking about. But yeah, like what happened to him? He just disappeared. He's like the richest guy in China, and he's just like gone the next day because he was like, I don't know about this whole thing, Chi, and he was like, you're done, buddy, get out of here. Yeah, no, I agree.
I think the difference with the Cold War was that the Soviet Union openly, publicly declared its intention to advance communism, and their goal was that the entire world would be communist.
Look at where we are now. Hold on, just to, really, really quickly. Didn't we ally with Russia at a certain point to finish that Second World War? I'm just saying. And then we created a whole bunch of supranational agencies that are now over top of our governments, like the WHO and the United Nations. And then after Nazi Germany fell, a bunch of Nazis went into those positions, right? Didn't that happen?
Well, bad ideas always take on new shapes and new forms to try to sell themselves. After the Soviet Empire collapsed in 1991,
after Chernobyl.
Well, Chernobyl was. It was a whole bunch of things.
Chernobyl kind of started it. Yeah. Sorry.
So people that believe in big government and in a whether it's a theocracy or fascist or national socialist or communist or whatever, people who are against freedom, they found the best way to sell their ideas was under the guise of environmentalism, because everybody who's against having a clean environment? I mean, nobody, right? It's, you've got like 100% of the population thinks that we shouldn't dump a bunch of poison into a pond or a river, and we should have a clean, pristine environment. Everybody supports that. So that's an example of how you now get this, well, we got to give up our charter rights and freedoms and consent to living inside the 15-minute prison district or the 15-minute city. And it's in the name of saving the earth from the climate holocaust, right? So it's always salesmanship, and it's a perennial battle. Like we're never going to get to a point where the forces of freedom and human rights and justice have just permanently triumphed. You're always going to have communists or Nazis or other people pushing bad ideas. This is why we have to be forever vigilant.
Yeah, they're shapeshifters a little bit. Like in one point, they look like communist Russia and the Russian, like what that looked like, and then it looks like they shapeshifted into the WHO or these supranational agencies, and it was the same excuse back then. It's for your safety, comrade. We're doing this for your health. We're doing this for your safety. Yeah. We want to protect you. You know what I mean?
Lockdowns. You can't be against lockdowns because that's to save grandma and save you.
Right.
Even though if you had asked 100 doctors in 2019, and I'm not suggesting that the majority is right because it's the majority, but just in terms of where the science was at, if you had asked 100 doctors in 2019, is it possible to stop a virus from spreading throughout society? You would have had close to 100 doctors who said no.
Yep.
You could temporarily slow it down. You could reduce the speed of the spread. You could temporarily slow it down, or you can let it spread amongst young, healthy, strong people, and then you have herd immunity. The virus no longer has any place to go, and you can protect the vulnerable, the aged, the very young, because pre-COVID the annual flu was killing toddlers and kids under 5. COVID did not do that.
Yeah. Well, but if you look at the flu numbers, from 2020, 2019 to 2025, there's a big anomaly. But if you look at the COVID numbers, 2019 to 2025, holy smoke, almost exactly the number of flu numbers under COVID. It's madness. It's just crazy.
Yeah, it was madness. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But it's the same political rhetoric. It's fear mongering.
Yes.
I came out with a book in January called Corrupted by Fear. And I reference how the communists and the national socialists and the fascists in Europe 90 years ago, 100 years ago, were using fear in order for governments to take away the rights and freedoms of citizens. Yeah. And we saw this in Canada in the 2020s, right? You've got this fear mongering to take away rights and freedoms.
Yeah, no, and it seems like that's the play. It seems like that's what they're doing in order to get what they want. And it's very concerning. One other just point I want to make, NATO was created to counter communist Russia, right? And then communist Russia,
yes.
But communist Russia collapsed. And NATO was like, I've got this cushy office. Like the guy who's leading NATO is like, I'm pretty sure Russia's a really big threat still. I like my job. I'm just going to keep it. And then 35 years later, 36 years later, we're like, yeah, NATO's really important. We need NATO and it's just interesting to me how we've got these structures and we think that we're doing one thing. And I think that they sell us the idea that we're doing one thing for your safety, comrade. We're doing this for your own good. And we buy into that. And if they get us hook, line, and sinker, they'll just go with it and keep lying about it. But if we push back, they'll try another lie. And so we think we're in one configuration, but I think that the reality of the situation is we're being manipulated at a very high level. And I mean, like, I hope I'm wrong. I want us to be self-governed. I want us to have the ability to hold our elected representatives accountable. I want the ability to talk to people when I feel like there's been a slight or a mistake or an accident and like we can fix this. Whereas now that's not the case. And so I'm just concerned that we're being played and that we've been played for a long, long time. Like this isn't new, right? And I think that our kind of examples of history is it seems like a replay. It doesn't seem like we've naturally come here. It seems like we're being led here and they use it because it works.
Well, the price of liberty is eternal vigilance, right?
Yes.
And I think Canadians, for the most part, we've been resting on our laurels. We were on the winning side in World War II. We were on the winning side on the Cold War. We've been resting on our laurels. Everything's fine. Everything's great. So let's just focus on, a nice holidays in the winter and material prosperity and fun, all of which is good. I mean, we need recreation, we need entertainment. We can't be serious all the time. But I think the whole culture has shifted so much towards materialism, consumerism, fun, pleasure, the pursuit of pleasure,
of shopping,
neglecting the pursuit of virtue. And so we've come into this cultural demise where, that's part of the COVID and lockdowns dynamic was that Professor Matthias Desmet from Ghent University in Belgium wrote about mass psychosis, mass formation, mass delusion, mass hysteria, these terms. And our culture was such that a lot of people, because our culture is rotten, a lot of people have this generalized anxiety. And then when COVID came along, people found a place to attach it to. And say, all of this generalized anxiety that people were feeling because they're spending too much time behind the screen and they're lonely, they attach it to COVID. And now the politicians present a solution and gave a lot of people meaning and purpose. You can save lives by reporting your neighbor to the police, and you can save lives by following really stupid, unscientific, useless rules. But you can save lives. It gave people a sense of meaning and purpose. So it's preserving liberty is perpetual, ongoing vigilance. You're always going to have tyrants and their supporters that are trying to enslave us.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, and it feels like I hope we're able to persevere. So we're almost at an hour, and I think that I have another meeting, so I have to get going too. We have two other cases that we want to talk about, so maybe we'll have you on again, and we can go over the other cases.
Absolutely.
Or do you want to do I don't think we want to do an overview. It'll take too long, so we'll have to have you on again, and we'll go over the other cases and maybe some other stuff, other conversations as well. So if you could tell everybody where to find you and how to support what you guys are doing, protecting Canadians from government overreach and enshrining our constitutional freedoms, that would be great.
So Justice Center, our website is www.jccf.ca, JCCF, so it's Justice Center Constitutional Freedoms, jccf.ca. You can sign up for our email newsletter, which we send out only twice a month. So you're not going to get your daily or weekly, but if you sign up for our email newsletter, you could do that online, www.jccf.ca. If you want to donate to support our work in defending freedom in Canada, please do so. You can get an official tax receipt. I'll mention in passing the book I referenced, Corrupted by Fear, is available on Amazon in the paperback and the Kindle and the audiobook as well. $25 on Amazon. And such a pleasure to be speaking with you today, and look forward to more conversations in future.
Yeah, no, it was wonderful to have you on, and you're welcome to come back. And I'm sure that I will have more questions that a constitutional lawyer like yourself will be able to help me understand. So with that, thank you very much. And just hang out. We'll talk in the green room before you go, and I'll stop the recording. So thanks everybody for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow.